Hey everybody, it's Michael. I'm back again with another walkthrough video, and today I would like to show you Hallertau. Hallertau is a new Uwe Rosenberg game, expert level. It's published by Lookout Games. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, and according to the box it takes 50 to 140 minutes. So I guess this translates as 30 minutes per player plus another 20 minutes. This is the English version. There is a German version as well. The English version is just making its way over to the US, but at least in Europe, both English and German versions are already available, I think. This is, as you might expect, once again a farming game, this time set in the Hallertau region in Bavaria, in Germany. According to the back of the box, the game is set around 1850, and each player is the, let's call it mayor, of a small town in the Hallertau region and trying to make their village prosper as much as possible with the usual ingredients of collecting resources, sowing crops and breeding animals. Mechanically, this is a worker placement game, and it's also called progressive worker placement. Basically, there are these action spots, and if you go there first, you only pay one worker, but later on you have to pay more workers to basically use the same action. Cards also play a very huge role in this game. There are lots of cards from many different decks. You start with a hand of cards at the beginning of the game, but you get to draw new ones during the game, and there are many different opportunities to play them, gain something from them and combo these together. And this is also where the, I guess, engine building comes in, because certain cards will give you benefits each round, and by playing cards in a certain way you can more or less build your own engine. So much for the introduction. What I'd like to do now is show you a full 3-player game. Enjoy! So I've set up a 3-player game, and as always, let's take a look at the components first. Starting with the main action board in the middle, each of the 20 spaces has 2 or 3 rows where players put their workers, and on each space the bottom row starts with 1 worker. There are 4 decks of cards. The bonus cards and the point cards are the same in every game, but there's a choice of 4 decks for the so-called farmyard decks, and I've decided to play with the so-called sheep deck. And then there's gateway cards. There's also 4 decks, and this one is the advanced deck. Then there's quadrant cards, which are used in a 1, 2 or 3 player game. Then over here there's a whole stockpile of different resources, and finally each player has quite a lot in front of them. First, I almost forgot, once again, I decided to give every player a colored marker from another game, so they can be distinguished during this video. The blue player is the start player, marked by this rooster token. Everybody has a box where they track their jewelry, and they start at 0. They have a stable board with 6 spaces, and each of these spaces received a farmyard card face down, and this is where they will store their sheep. Then each player has one of these community center boards. There is a community center, and the number in the window will determine how many workers the player gets each round. There are 5 craft buildings that we're trying to push to the right during the course of the game, because then the house, the center, can follow, and the number in the window will increase, and ultimately there will also be victory points in that window. However, there are these nasty boulders that we have to deal with using tools. Then we have the field board, where everybody starts with 3 fields, and the lower the field, the less fertile it is. So of the 3 that blue starts with, this is the most fertile, but there's also one level above that. Down here is a stockpile, where each player starts with a barley, a flax and a rye. Then each player starts with a hand of cards. There are 4 gateway cards and 1 point card. The gateway cards are supposed to give you an indication how to start first and give you a little kickstart. The point cards are relevant at the end of the game, but each player starts with 1 to give them some direction. Finally, there are these overview cards. Normally every player would get one, but in this case we'll only have 1. And those show the round overview. And there's a variant where with just illustrations, and the other side has everything in text. And I guess we'll just use this side actually. And then we can already start the game. The game will last for 6 rounds, as indicated by the cards on each player's staple board, and each round consists of 10 phases. In the first phase, we clear workers from the action board. In a 4-player game, we would simply remove the topmost row of workers from each of the 20 action spaces. So basically, in this situation, we would remove all the workers. However, in a 1 to 3 player game, we draw the top quadrant card and only remove the topmost row of workers from certain quadrants. And in this case, we remove workers from quadrant 1 2, and 3. So up here is quadrant 1, so all these workers are gone. Then this is quadrant number 2. And quadrant number 3 is down here. And then this card is removed from the game. Next up, each player removes the farmyard card of the current round from their stable board, puts it next to the stable board, and gets workers for the round. So blue removes the first card and gets 6 workers because, as a reminder, there's a 6 showing in the window of the community center. And these workers are placed on the card, so you don't accidentally pick it up unless all the workers are gone. And yellow and red do the same, of course. Then in phase 3, we trigger income effects from bonus cards, but nobody has played any of those yet. And then in phase 4, which is basically the main part of the game, players take turns putting workers on the main board or trade workers for tools. Now, before blue takes an action, let's first take a look at what we're trying to achieve. So basically there are 2 main ways of getting points in the game. One is the community center, by advancing those craft buildings as far to the right as possible, because then the community center can follow and ultimately will display points in the window. And the other are the cards. We have 1 point card that will give us 5 points. The condition is that we have to have 6 of these gateway cards in play. So right now we have 4. The question is whether we can play all 4 of them during the course of the game, but anyway we'll need to get at least 2 more and also play them to get these 5 points. As you can see, all the gateway cards don't give any points, and farmyard cards usually don't give points as well. So the main way of points are the point cards and the bonus cards. We can either get bonus cards by going on this action space here, or fulfilling gateway cards, because many gateway cards also give you bonus cards when you fulfill them. We basically have to try to work both on the craft buildings for the community center, but also on our cards. Just doing one and totally neglecting the other is probably not a good idea, so we have to find a way in which we can do the best of both. For this card we simply have to wait and play more gateway cards. This one is triggered when we have exactly 1 empty field. This is certainly achievable. We have 3 fields. If we sow on 2 of them, then we'll have exactly 1 empty field. This one refers to the game state because it says an action space is fully occupied. We will definitely can work towards that, but maybe it will just happen on its own. Here we need a number of flags equal to the number in the window. This is currently 6. The more we advance the center, of course, the harder it will get to actually achieve this. And this one requires us to have 1, 3 or 4 of these farmyard cards in play. We'll get 1 of these cards each round. We can draw more by going to this action space, but this is again something for later on maybe. Although we could decide to trigger it if we just have 1 card in play. Let's start working with this one. If we get to fulfill this condition, then we're allowed to plant, quote unquote, brick on a field as though it were a crop. But to plant something, we need to have it, so let's concentrate on getting a brick. And there are multiple ways of doing that, but right now we prefer the clearing. And to do an action, you need to place workers on the bottommost row. So we can just pick 1 worker, put it here, and do the action. We get a new field of strength or fertility 2. So we take 1 from the supply, choose an empty column. Let's just take the next one and put it at level 2. And then we simply get 1 brick from the supply and put it on the bottom row, because on this row the cardinality is 1, so each brick down here counts as 1 brick. If we want to track 2 bricks, we can either move this up here, so now 2, or we can take a second brick and put it down here. And that's our entire first action. The yellow player wants to go to the weekly market. The space is entirely empty, so 1 worker on the bottommost row suffices. He'll get a meat and a sheep, both from the supply. The meat is simply stocked with the other resources down here. The sheep, however, goes on the stable board on the space of the current round, but then following any arrows. So it would normally go here, but it follows the arrow down to this card, which basically represents that the sheep has a natural lifespan. So if we get into round number 4, and then in phase 2, the yellow player needs to remove the card, and the sheep is still on there, it'll die of natural causes. However, there are ways to prolong the life of sheep by moving them further to the right, until they are ultimately in the stable, where they can never die and give victory points at the end of the game. And that's already yellow's action. The red player decides to do something similar. He decides to go to the sheep market. Here he already needs 2 workers to use the action space. And he gets a sheep and a hide. The hide is simply moved into here. and the sheep goes on this cart. Blue uses 2 workers to go to the fertilizing space. First we can move up to 2 empty fields into row number 5, and of course we choose the 2 fields in row 2 because they are currently the least fertile. And then we can sow 1 crop. These are the crops that we have in our storage. Let's start by sowing rye on this space. So basically by giving up 1 rye, you'll get 3 later on. I explained this in detail in the harvest phase, but this is the general idea. And the reason why I chose to have rye at the worst yield is because we get some rye once we fulfill this. Yellow decides at the butchery that he can do for 1 worker. And here you have to pay a sheep. So basically this arrow always means pay. So this sheep is gone. The whole discussion of how long it'll live a natural life is basically moot. Let's return back to the supply. And he gets 4 meat and 2 hides. He already has 1 meat, so by placing it up here, that's 5, so a gain of 4, and we can track 2 hides like this. Now, he would like to play some cards. You can play cards basically at any time. First of all, he wants to play this card. It requires that he has a meat and a hide, just has, since there's no arrow. So you can simply keep those things, and he gets either a hop or a brick and another farmyard card. He decides to take a brick, and then he gets to draw another farmyard card. And this card is simply put face down over here, because certain cards require you to keep track of how many cards you might have already played. And so he simply draws a farmyard card from the deck. But he's not done. He has another card that he now can play. He needs to have 1, 2 or 4 hides to get 1, 2 or 3 tools respectively. He has 2 hides, so we can put this card face down and get 2 tools from the supply. And tools don't go on this farm board, they just stay here. Red goes to the small trade space. He gets 2 crops. He decides to take a hop and a flax. Then he either gets a milk or a wool. He decides to get a wool. And then 1 sheep gains +1 round. So this sheep is moved over here. Blue decides to take the busy weekend. We get a choice of milk or wool. We decide to take milk. Then we can sow up to twice. We decide to put the flax up here and the barley up here. Then we can play our card that we have exactly 1 empty field, and we're allowed to sow brick on there as though it were a crop. So by investing 1 brick, we'll get 5 later on. And for this card, we get to draw a bonus card. This requires us to have 7 milk and 6 sheep. And if we're able to pull that off, which will be hard, then we can play the card and get an income of 1 sheep each round, and also 3 points at the end of the game. Yellow goes to the nursery. He can either get 3 brick or 3 crops. He decides to take 3 crops. 3 hops to be specific. So that just go here. But then he plays a card where he has to pay 2 hops, but then get a new field at level 4. Red wants to sow, so he takes the cultivation space with 1 worker. Now, hops goes on this field, rye goes on this one, and then we want to sow flax on this field. But we shouldn't just take this and move it over here, because then we actually spend 2. So this one moves down here, and we get another one from supply and sow it over here. Blue was actually hoping that this condition would be met. He has only 2 workers remaining, so he cannot place 3 workers in one of these spaces to make that condition fulfilled. Yellow still has 3 workers, but the question is whether he'll use them to fill up any one of those extra spaces. So blue won't get any tools, which he kind of wanted to have. So what he actually decides is to take the other possible action to turn in workers for tools. So these workers are simply spent back to the supply, and he just gets 2 tools. But now he's done for this action phase. Yellow decides to go to the nursery again, take another 3 crops, and he decides to take 3 barley. Red doesn't have any clay yet, so he decides to take his last 2 workers to the tool shed to get 4 clay. Blue is already done, so it's yellow's turn. He decides to go to the farming space to sow up to 4 times. He decides to sow 3 barley, so this drops from 4 to 1. And we put new ones on each of these 3 fields. And then he also decides to sow flax. Then in phase number 5, everybody gets to pick up the farmyard card that is now empty because all the workers are gone. And for blue, we have to have 10 crops of the same type. not spend them, just have them to get 2 meat and another bonus card. So maybe if we go really, really big on flags, that would be a possibility. We'll have to see. Then in phase 6, every empty field would move up 1 space, and then we'd pick one of those empty fields again to move up another space, basically representing that they're lying fallow, and so increasing their fertility. But every player has all their fields filled, so we just skip that one, and then it's a harvest. And basically we move the good from each field over to the left, and then that field decreases in fertility. So for the blue player, this moves over here, and this drops down. We have our 5 clay, this drops down. We get 4 barley, drops down. We get 5 flags, and it drops down. And all the other players, of course, do the same. And of course, a field that was only at level 2 yielded 2, but cannot decrease in fertility any further. And unfortunately, we only have 5 flags now. We need to have 6 to fulfill this one, but hopefully next round. Red wants to play a card. He has 4 hops, so he gets 2 additional barley and another bonus card. Yellow has 12 barley, so he can play this card where he can get 2 tools if he has at least 11 barley, and he also gets a bonus card. Then in phase 8, every sheep gives a milk, so red for his 1 sheep gains 1 milk. And then in phase 9, it's the progress, the other main part of the game, where each player, usually simultaneously, but of course he will take a look at everybody in turn, gets to advance their craft buildings. Now the cost for advancing a craft building depends on the round, and in round 1 advancing a craft building costs 1 good. And the type of craft building indicates the good and also might apply restrictions. For the carpentry, for example, you can spend both brick and rye, but you have to spend more brick than rye. Since you only have to spend 1 good, that means that it has to be 1 brick, because if we would just spend 1 rye, then we wouldn't be spending more brick than rye. So by spending 1 brick, we can advance the carpentry 1 space to the right. Since we still have brick, we could do this a second time. However, there's now a boulder in the way. And to advance a craft building along with a boulder in its way, you have to spend 1 tool. So let's just spend 1 tool. This is just indicated by moving it a little bit away or something, because the tools actually don't go away by spending them. So we can pay another brick and move the carpentry 1 space further to the right. Now we still have some bricks, but now there's 2 boulders in the way. So if we would like to advance the carpentry 1 more step by spending another brick, we'd already need 2 tools, and we only have 1 left. So we're done with the carpentry for this round. The brew house needs more barley than hop. We can spend 1 barley to advance it 1 space, another barley, our second tool, to advance it a 2nd space. Now we're out of tools, so we'll only be able to advance the other 3 crafts buildings by 1 space at the maximum. The cooling house requires either milk or meat. We have 1 milk that we can spend to move it 1 space. So even if we had another tool, we wouldn't be able to move the cooling house further because we run out of milk and meat. For the bakehouse, we need either rye or flax. We can only pay a maximum of 1 flax, which doesn't apply this round because we're only paying 1 good anyway. We have a lot of flax remaining, but the thing is we're actually kind of saving it. So let's spend a rye. The manufacturer is probably manufacturing clothing. That's why we need wool or hide or flax again. We have neither wool nor hide, so we have to pay 1 of our precious flax. And now we cannot advance any further because we've run out of both tools and crafting materials. However, there's now a gap since we advanced each building 1 space, so we can move the entire community center 1 space to the right, and next round we'll get 7 workers. The red player didn't get any tools, so that means he can only advance each building 1 step at the maximum. For the carpentry, he pays a brick. For the brew house, a barley. For the cooling house, a milk. For the bakehouse, 1 rye. And for the manufacturer, 1 hide. And then the house can move along 1 space as well. The yellow player has 4 tools, but let's see whether he actually has enough materials to fully make use of them. He only has 1 clay to start with, so that's removed. The carpentry moves 1 space, but that's it for this round. Brewhouse can move 1 space, and he's down to 11 hops, barley. Let's take a look at the other buildings first before we decide when to use the tools actually. The cooling house requires 1 meat, that's not a problem. For the bakehouse, let's spend 1 flax, and for the manufacturer, let's spend a hide. Then let's actually spend another hide, exhaust 1 tool to move the manufacturer 1 space further. The same for the cooling house, so 1 meat, 1 tool. And for the brew house, 1 barley, 1 tool. Then the bakehouse can still take a step by expanding the last tool. We don't want to pay rye or flax because it's our last one, so let's actually pay yet another barley. He can also only take 1 step, but he's further along than the other players. And then phase 10, the boulders reset, so they're basically in the same configuration as they were before, so that there's 1 empty space next to the craft building, then 1 boulder, an empty space, and another boulder. And of course, every player does that. And then we move into round number 2. First, we're pulling off workers again. Quadrant 1, 2, and then either 3 or 4, determined randomly. Let's start with quadrant 1. It's rather easy. There's just 1 worker here. In quadrant 2, we remove these 3 workers in the topmost row over here. And then let's roll a die. That doesn't come with the game. You have to provide your own methods for a random decision. Let's say even is quadrant 3 and odd is quadrant 4. So that's quadrant 4 then. So the board looks like this at the start of the round. Next, everybody takes the next farmyard card, puts it to the side. There are no sheep on there yet. Then everybody receives 7 workers. Then before actually moving into phase 3 to deal with income, a couple of players want to play income cards. And since you can play cards at any time, that's perfectly fine. Red plays this card. He has to pay 3 hops. But then he gets an income of 1 tool per round. So let's actually take that right now. And it will also get him 3 points at the end of the game. Blue doesn't have any bonus income cards yet, so there's no income. Yellow plays this card. He has to pay 1 hop. But for that he gets an income of 1 barley per round, as well as 2 points at the end of the game. Then this is a very interesting card. Let's see how it pays off. He has to pay 3 fields, but then he'll get 1 new field at level 5 each turn. So he gets rid of these 3 fields, but then gets 1 at level 5. Let's see whether this works out, or maybe it was too soon to do this. And finally, this is not a bonus card, but he decides to play it anyway now. He needs 8 crops of the same type. He still has 10 barley to get 1 sheep. And he didn't play it last round because now the sheep gets to live 1 round longer. So he's already played 4 gateway cards. So that was phase 3, and now phase 4 is worker placement again. Blue is still the starting player because nobody took one of these card spaces that also make you the starting player. Blue starts by picking the farming space. He gets to sow 4 times. He decides to sow 1 barley and 1 rye, as well as 2 flax. So when he harvests all that flax, that'll be 8 plus another 2 is 10 crops of the same type. So this would be done, and it's also a number that it is at least 7. So this card will also be done during the harvest phase. Yellow goes to the town hall. He has to move a craft building 1 space to the left. He can do that with many craft buildings, but he decides to use the brew house. And then he gets 2 jewelry. And jewelry is actually used to advance a craft building despite of the cost. So for 1 jewelry, you can advance 1 craft building by 1 space. You still need tools, no matter how many goods you have to pay. So later on, when each advancement costs 6 goods, it's of course better to spend the jewelry then, but maybe you want to spend it early on because you just need that last push. And to actually do the town hall, so to move a craft building to the left, you have to have created a situation where not all craft buildings advanced at the same pace, because then you didn't have any gaps. For example, the red player wouldn't be able to use the town hall right now because he cannot move any craft building to the left. Red moves to the weekly market, so he gets a meat and another sheep. Blue moves to the clearing, so he gets 1 clay and another new field at level 2. Yellow decides to go to the town hall another time. Red goes to the sheep market and gets a hide and yet another sheep. And now he has as many sheep as fields, 3 and 3. So he gets a new field at level 3. Blue picks the land sale. He has to get rid of a field, but then he gets the jewelry and 3 clay. So he's now at 7 clay. Yellow picks the busy weekend. He decides to take a wool, and then he can sow twice. Red goes sheep shearing, so he gets 1 wool per sheep. 3. So he's now at 4 wool. Then 1 sheep gains an additional round. And then he can play this card because now he has at least 2 wool. So he gets a milk and a bonus card. Blue decides to draw a gateway card. He'd also get the rooster, but he already has it. 3, 7 or 11 cards of the same deck in play. That is good because we want to have 6 gateway cards in play anyway. The question is whether we'll go for a 7th one then to get 2 jewelry, or whether we'll be satisfied once we have that one. Yellow goes to the tool shed to get 4 clay. Red goes farming to sow, and he decides to plant 1 flax, 1 barley, 1 rye, and 1 hops. Blue decides that it's time to trigger this condition himself, so he takes his remaining 3 workers, puts them on the weekly market. He gets a sheep and a meat, and then he can play this card. He gets 1 hops, 2 tools, and another bonus card. 6 rye and 5 meat, we just have to have them, and if we can achieve that, then we'll have a nice income each round, and 4 pounds. This one's actually more interesting than this one, I guess. Yellow goes to the butchery, pays a sheep, and gets 4 meat and 2 hides. Then we're done with phase 4, and everybody can pick up their farmyard card. For blue, that's spending 2 goods of the same type to get a tool and another field. Let's actually decide to play this right now. The only good that we can safely give up 2 right now is the clay. So these 2 are gone, but then we get another tool. We now have 5, and we also get a new field, which is interesting because we can immediately increase the yield. So this is our first farmyard card done, which means we could already trigger this one, which would give us no meat, but 2 milk. But I don't think we're in a hurry to do this. Maybe we can wait until we have at least 3 of them. Then it's phase 6. Blue gets to move this up twice. All the others have all their fields fully planted. The harvest. Now we have at least 7 flags, so we get 3 rye. This one moves up to 5. This card is done. We get another bonus card. Also, this is our 3rd complete gateway card, so we now could trigger this one to get 1 jewelry, but I don't think we're in a hurry here. If we manage to get up to 6 hops, then we'll get 1 rye each round. And then we have 10 crops of the same type, 10 flags, so we get 2 meat. Yet another bonus card, and this is our 2nd completed farmyard card, so we're well underway for this one. The bonus card, we would have to give up 1 wool to get a meat each round. This is rather cheap. Right now we don't have any wool, but we have a sheep, so this is certainly doable. Yellow's harvest is rather simple, and for red. Blue has 6 flags, so 2 sheep gain 1 round each. So this one is safe, and 1 other is moved over to here. And red gets another bonus card. Each sheep gets a milk, so blue gets 1 milk, and red gets 3. And then it's progress. Blue has 5 tools, so theoretically he should be able to advance each of his crafts buildings twice. Each advancement now costs 2 goods, so let's go for the carpentry. We still only can pay bricks, from 5 bricks down to 1. That's 2 steps. First tool is exhausted. For the brew house we basically need 4 barley. We have exactly that, so those are all removed. And yet another tool is gone. For the cooling house we need 4 milk or meat in any combination. We have 3 meat and 1 milk. So that's another 2 steps. 3rd tool is spent. For the bakehouse we have a lot of flags, but we can spend a maximum of 1 for each advancement. Let's pay 2 flags and 2 rye for these 2 advancements. The 4th tool is spent. And then finally for the manufacturer we have to use flags because we don't have any wool or hides. So for 2 steps that's another 4. our 5th tool is spent, but the house can move 2 steps now, so we can have 9 workers next round. Yellow wants to move the carpentry 2 spaces, so that's 4 brick gone. And the first tool spent. Let's also advance the brew house 2 steps for now, so that doesn't cost a tool, but 4 barley. The cooling house can be moved 2 steps as well, for a total of 4 meat. Second tool. The bakehouse can advance 2 steps for now by paying 2 rye and 2 barley. The manufacturer advances twice, so we need to spend a tool, 1 wool, 2 hides and a flax. And now with 1 tool left, one of these 2 could still advance. So let's pick the bakehouse, 1 of each of these. And the 4th tool is spent. And then the house advances 2 spaces as well. Red only has 1 tool, so let's advance each craft building 1 space first, and then let's see where we best use this tool. The carpentry needs 2 bricks. The brew house needs 2 barley. The cooling house needs some meat and a milk. Bakehouse takes a flax and a rye. Manufacturer takes a hide and yet another flax. So our best option is probably to spend a flax and a barley and our tool to advance the bakehouse once more. And so the house moves up 1 space only, so red will only get 8 workers. And then we replace the boulders and it's on to the 3rd round. For removing workers, let's see what we get. The 1st, 3rd and 4th quadrant. Then everybody takes their card and receives workers. For the income, red gains another tool, blue doesn't get anything, yellow receives 1 barley and a new field at level 5. And then we place workers, again starting with the blue player. Blue starts off by taking the fertilizing action, so we can move 2 empty fields into row 5. We'll take this one and this one, and then we get to sow once, and we decide to sow some hops. Yellow moves to the tool shed to get 4 clay, but then he decides to play this card and get rid of 2 clay. So he gets 2 more point cards as well as a bonus card. Red goes to the small trade, decides to take 2 barley, a milk, and then 1 sheep gains an additional round. Blue decides to go to the weekly market, so he gets a sheep and a meat. Yellow decides to go to the farming space to get another field at level 5. Red does an action that we haven't seen yet, the sheep breeding. He can spend 4 milk to get 2 additional sheep. Blue does a land sale, so this one's gone. Let's just move these over here. He gets 1 more jewelry and 3 clay. Yellow moves to the town hall. He moves the bakehouse 1 space to the left, and he gets 2 more jewelry. Red goes sheep sharing, so he gets 5 wool and 1 sheep gains an additional round. Blue takes the busy weekend. He gets a wool and gets to sow twice. He sows rye and flax. And then he spends the wool again and puts this bonus card in play, so he gets a meat in the income phase and also 1 point at the end of the game. Yellow goes to the nursery, decides to take 3 crops, 1 hops and 2 barley. Red takes the fertilizing action, so these are now at strength 5, and then he sows 1 barley. Blue goes to the butchery, pays a sheep, gets 4 meat and 2 hides. Yellow takes the cultivation action, he gets to sow 3 times, and he decides to sow some barley, rye and hops. Well, actually, let's switch these 2. Then yellow doesn't have any more workers, blue doesn't have any more workers, but red still has 3. First, red takes the cultivation action. He decides to sow 1 hops, 1 rye and a flax. And then for his last workers he takes the clay delivery, where he gets clay equal to the round number, so 3. Then everybody can take their farmyard card. For blue it's this one, we have to spend 1 clay per column without field. So right now that would be 4 to immediately get a sheep and some milk. Then fallow fields increase their fertility. So this can move up twice for blue. For yellow, this can also move up twice. And red doesn't have any empty fields. Then it's harvest time. Then blue can play this bonus card. He has 6 rye and 5 meat. 4 points at the end of the game. There's probably not a chance that he'll get 7 gateway cards for 2 jewelry, so we can just spend this now. We have 3 gateway cards in play, so that's 1 jewelry. Yellow can spend 3 barley that he just harvested. 3 are gone. And that'll allow him to plant a barley on a field each income phase, which is very great because he gets 1 free field and 1 free barley. Red now has 7 barley and 5 hops, so he can play this bonus card. And then he can spend 3 hops for 1 jewelry. That'll also give him a bonus card. Then milking sheep. Blue gets 1 milk, yellow gets none, and red gets 5. And then it's progress time. Advancing a craft building costs 3 goods, but if you pay 2 different goods, then you get a discount of 1. So, for example, in the cooling house, normally you'd have to pay 3, but if you pay 1 milk and 1 meat, that's 2 different goods, and it's 2 goods altogether, so that's sufficient. This doesn't work for these 2 buildings, because if you would only pay 2 different goods, for example 1 brick and 1 rye, then the condition that you have to pay more brick than rye would be violated, and it doesn't work. This bonus right here is actually only good for these 3 buildings, or rather this discount. Let's start with blue. So for the carpentry, 1 step costs either 3 clay or 2 clay and 1 rye. So we want to take 2 steps. That's our first tool spent, and then we need to spend 4 clay and 2 rye. Next up is the brew house. The thing is, blue doesn't have any barley, but he still wants to take 2 steps. 1 tool gone and 2 jewelry, because as a reminder, 1 jewelry will allow you to advance 1 crafts building 1 step, no matter the original cost. Then 1 step with the cooling house is just 1 meat and 1 milk, but then we're out of milk. So the next step would cost 3 meat, which we still have. We could play this card. It would give us 2 milk immediately, but since we're only at 2 farmyard cards in play right now, we wouldn't get any meat, so it's a bit of a waste. So I guess we'll keep that one around and just pay 3 meat plus an additional tool to make this advancement. Let's do a manufacture first. We don't have any wool, but we can profit from the bonus again, so we pay 2 flax and 2 hides to make 2 steps, as well as our 4th tool. And then for the bakehouse, we also can do 2 steps, paying 2 rye and another 2 flax. And that's our 5th tool spent, and our house advances 2 spaces. For yellow, we want to advance the carpentry by 2 steps. First, that's one of our 4 tools. Then the first step costs 2 clay and a rye, and the second step costs a jewelry because we're out of clay. For the brew house, we also want to take 2 steps. That's another tool spent. The first step is 2 barley and a hop, and the second one as well. Since we only have 3 meat and no milk, the first step for the cooling house just costs us all the meat, and then the second step is a tool and another jewelry. For the bakehouse, we can take 2 steps without spending a tool, and we can use the discount for 2 different goods. So we pay 2 barley and 2 rye. Then for the manufacture, we want to take 1 step. Since we only have flax, that would cost everything. Let's actually take 2 steps. So we spend our last tool and 2 jewelry. And then the house also advances twice. Red only has 2 tools. For the carpentry, 2 clay and 1 rye. For the brew house, 2 barley, 1 hop. The cooling house costs us 3 milk. In the bakehouse we can make use of the bonus by just paying 1 flax and a rye and a barley. And then at the manufacturer, let's spend another flax and a wool. So the house moves once. For the first tool, let's advance the manufacturer another space by paying another flax and another wool. And for the second tool, let's actually take the brew house for 2 barley and 1 hop. And then we reset the boulders and move into round number 4. First we remove workers from quadrants 1, 2 and 4. But this means, for example, that the weekly market is simply blocked. Then each player removes the farmyard card. There's still no sheep that die, and the players receive 11, 11 and 9 workers respectively. Then bonuses. Blue gets 2 meat and a rye. Red gains a tool and a barley. Yellow gets a field at level 5. 1 barley, and he can sow a barley. So why not put it on that new level 5 field. And then it's actions again. Blue starts by going to the town hall. He moves back to the brew house and gets 2 jewelry. Yellow goes to the sheep market, gets a sheep and a hide. And since we're now in round 4, the sheep go directly to the stable. Red also goes to the sheep market. Blue still needs 1 more gateway card because he wants to have 6 in play. He has played 4. He has a 5th one. He goes here. He stays start player. Okay, this one's rather nice. He needs 4 tools, which he has, so he can immediately play it to get a flax and to hide. Yellow goes over here, draws a farmyard card and takes the rooster from blue. Yellow drew this card. He has to pay 1 flax for each sheep on farmyard cards. He doesn't have sheep on farmyard cards, only in the stable. So basically this card doesn't cost anything and he gets a sheep for it. And then he can play this card. He has to pay a sheep. He gets 4 hides. This is free, of course. He doesn't have to go to the butchery. The butchery would give him 4 meat and 2 hides. But still it's 4 hides. A bonus card for no action at all. So 1 sheep is already gone again. Hides are now at 5. And he draws another bonus card. Red goes sheep shearing. He gets 6 wool and 1 sheep gets an additional round. Blue wants to play this card. Right now it would be 4 clay, since there are 4 empty columns. So he decides to go to the clearing space first, where he gets a clay and a new field at level 2. Yellow goes to the clay delivery to get 4 clay. And yes, the proper term is clay, although sometimes I've been saying bricks. Red, for the first time I think, goes to the butchery. So although he's trying to breed sheep, every now and then he also has to slaughter one of them. So he pays a sheep, but gets 2 hides and 4 meat. Blue would also like some clay. He goes here, now at 5. And then he decides to play this card. There are 3 empty columns, so he has to pay 3 clay. But he immediately gets a milk and a sheep. Another bonus card. Just keep this face down for now. Then this is a farmyard card. And then since we have 3 farmyard cards in play, probably doesn't make sense to wait on the 4th one. So we play this gateway card. That'll give us 2 milk and 2 meat. Then this was our 6th gateway card. So we can finally play this one. So it's just 5 points at the end of the game. And now let's take a look at the bonus card. If we make it up to 5 jewelry, we get a meat each round. We could actually do that by going to the town hall once more. Let's see whether this is actually doable. Yellow uses the fertilizing space, moves up these 2, and plants some hops. Red goes to the nursery to get 3 crops, and he simply decides to take 1 of each of these. Blue goes to the small trade space. First he gets 2 crops, he decides to take some barley and hops. Then the choice of milk or wool, takes a wool, and finally 1 sheep gains a round. And then since we have 6 hops, we can play this income card, which will give us 1 rye, but more importantly, in this case, 3 points at the end of the game. Yellow takes the fertilizing action again, which seems a bit insane, but we'll see where he's getting with that in a minute. So he can sow 1 flax. He has no fields in rows 2, 3 or 4 because they're all at level 5. So he gets to play this income card. Red goes farming to sow up to 4 times. He sows a flax, a rye, up here, some hops, and barley. And then, I hope this is worth it, we'll see. He plays this card where he has to give up 1 planted field, but it's worth 6 points, and in each income phase, there's still 2 of them, he'll get a new field at level 3. So this field along with the flags on it is just gone, but we now have this card in play. Blue goes to the busy weekend space. He gets another wool and can sow twice. Definitely wants to sow barley and then also rye. Yellow also takes the busy weekend to get a wool, and then he sows hops and rye. Then it's back to blue. There are not many spaces where we can go with just 1 worker. We could get a 6th tool, but I don't think that's necessary right now. Let's actually take back the rooster and get a new point card. Paying 6 rye and 6 hops for 10 points. Then we're done with phase 4 and move into phase 5. Everybody takes back their card. For blue, that's paying 1 rye for each space left in the jewel box to gain 2 sheep. I'm not sure whether we'll be able to pull this off. Although it would kind of combo with this one, because then we want to have many jewels anyway. The problem is that we have to pay rye for this and for this. But let's see. And red's farmyard card requires him to have at least 10 wool. He has 13 right now, so he can get 2 hide and another sheep. Then fallow fields increase their fertility. That's only applicable for blue. And another one step. And then it's harvest time. For red. And finally for yellow. Yellow plays this card, so by playing 3 hops he can get 5 clay. Then sheep give milk, blue gets 2, yellow gets 1, and red gets 6. And then it's time for progress. Since we're in round 4, advancing a crafts building costs 4 goods, but if you're using 2 different types of goods, then it's only 3. Blue starts with the carpentry. He can only advance it 1 space for now, so that'll cost 2 clay, and that's all he has, plus 1 rye. Let's advance the brew house 2 spaces. That doesn't cost a tool because we moved it back previously. So that's 4 barley and 2 hops. Let's advance the cooling house by 2 steps as well. For that we have to spend our first tool, and then the first step is 2 meat and 1 milk, and then for the second step let's put it the other way around, so 1 meat and 2 milk. Let's also advance the bakehouse twice. That's another 2 spent. Since we're low on barley, let's only pay rye and flax. Unfortunately, we can only spend 1 flax per step. The first step is 2 rye and flax, and the next step is another 2 rye and another flax. Let's also move the manufacture twice. Another 2 spent. For the first step, let's pay 1 wool, 1 hide, and 1 flax, and we'll also do that for the second step. The house moves twice, so we now get 12 workers and 18 points. The thing is, we still have 2 unspent tools. We also have some jewelry left, but since we're trying to get this bonus card out, let's not actually spend jewelry. So what we can do is move the cooling house 1 step more. That requires 2 tools because we're now pushing 2 boulders, but we still have 2 left, and that'll cost us 2 meat and 1 milk. And it's also very important that we did this because then we can use the town hall next round to actually get the 2 jewelry that we still need. And in case you're wondering what these 3 victory points mean, that's basically a bonus if you've advanced certain craft buildings, but not enough to actually move the house. If the game were to end right now, we'd get 18 plus 3. Yellow advances the carpentry twice. That's 4 clay plus 2 rye. And 1 of the 4 tools spent. The brew house is also advanced twice, so that's another tool. 4 barley, as well as 2 hops. Cooling house, that is only advanced once, because yellow doesn't have any meat. It doesn't require a tool for just 1 advancement, but we have to pay 1 jewelry. Then the bakehouse is advanced twice again. That's another tool. One advancement is barley, flax and rye, and the other is 2 flax and 1 rye. And then the manufacturer is also advanced twice. That's the last tool spent. First advancement is 2 hides and a wool, and the second one 2 hides and a flax. Red advances the carpentry once for 2 clay and a rye. The brew house twice, that's a tool, for barley and 2 hops. The cooling house twice, that's another tool, 2 meat and 4 milk. The bakehouse once, 2 rye and a barley. And the manufacturer twice. No, let's just make that once. So we don't use the tool on that one. 2 hide and 1 wool. And then let's actually use the last tool plus the 1 jewelry to advance the carpentry, because then it'll also be 2 steps. And then of course we set the boulders and move into round number 5. And if resetting the boulders means that some are pushed off the board, they just, well, they're off the board. The second to last quadrant card, 3 and 4, and then either 1 or 2. So let's say even is quadrant 1 and odd is quadrant 2. So quadrant 1 will be cleared. Everybody moves off a farmyard card, still there are no sheep dying, then the players receive 12, 12, 11 workers respectively. Bonuses. Red gets a tool, 1 barley and a new field at level 3. Blue gets 2 meat and 2 rye. And yellow gets a milk, 1 field and a barley, and we again put the barley on the field. And then we are off to actions. Blue moves to the town hall first, moves the cooling house to the left, gets 2 jewelry and can play this card. Yellow goes farming and he plants barley, 1 rye, 1 flax and 1 hop. Red goes sheep shearing, he gets 6 wool. This sheep is also moved to the stable, so he now has 18 wool. And now he plays his point card. He has to pay 13 wool, but that's 10 points at the end of the game. Yes, he could have waited a little longer, but on the other hand, he now has enough, and then that's out of the way. Blue takes the clay delivery to get 5 clay. Yellow goes to the sheep market, gets a sheep and a hide. Red also does a clay delivery for 5 clay. Blue does cultivation. He plants a rye, and then he also plants flax and barley. Yellow goes sheep breeding, spends 2 milk and gets another sheep. Red goes to the butchery space, gives up 1 sheep but gets 4 meat and 2 more hides. So the conditions on this bonus card are fulfilled. That's another 6 points and 1 more meat during the game. Blue decides to get another point card, spending 5 meat. With all the income, that's actually doable. Yellow goes sheep shearing, so he gets 3 wool. Red selects farming and plants barley, rye, hops and flax. Blue would also like to sow, so he selects cultivation. So he sows rye and hops. Yellow goes to the tool shed to get 4 more clay. Red goes to the clearing to get another level 2 field as well as 1 clay. Blue also takes the clay delivery to get 5 more clay. Blue decides to get yet another bonus card, and yellow, and also becomes star player, this time for good. And then he moves to the small trade, takes 2 rye and a wool. Then everybody gets to pick up their card. Remove the seed from 1 field and gain 2 tools. I guess it's too late for that. Fellow fields. Red gets increased this one by 2. Yellow pushes this up here. For blue nothing happens. And then it's a harvest. Then she produces milk. For blue that's 2. For yellow it's 3. And for red it's 5. I almost forgot. Blue wants to play this card. He has to pay 1 rye per space left in the jewel box. So that's 5 rye. But then he gets 2 sheep. And if we do that before getting the milk, then he of course has 2 milk more. And he also gets a bonus card for that. 2 hide. That's something we have right now. Yellow plays this card. He has to get rid of 3 sheep, but he gets 2 tools and 2 jewelry. And 2 more bonus cards. And then it's progress. In round 5, advancing craft building costs 5 goods. 4 goods if you're using 2 types, and 3 goods if you're using 3 types for the carpentry. Let's actually advance this 3 times. That costs us 2 tools, 9 clay, so all but 1 is gone, and 3 rye. Next up is the Brew House. Let's advance it 1 space for now. 3 barley and 1 hop. For the cooling house, we're actually trying to save meat to play this card later on. We could spend 5 milk, which seems a bit of a waste. On the other hand, what we're going to do with it. So let's do that. Let's spend 5 milk to advance once. Let's also spend a jewel to advance a second time. We can advance the Bakehouse by paying 1 of each. Then for the manufacturer, we basically don't have anything, so we have to use jewels to advance it. So let's actually advance it twice. That uses another tool and 2 more jewelry. We still have 2 tools remaining, so let's actually spend all of our jewels to make full use of our tools, and let's do it like this. And then we're at 50 points. Yellow also has 9 clay, so he decides to also advance the carpentry by 3 spaces. That'll require 2 tools, all the 9 clay, as well as 3 rye. For the brew house, let's advance twice. That's another tool. 6 barley, 2 hops. There's only 4 milk and no meat. So for the cooling house, we'll actually need a jewelry. And let's also spend twice with the tool. For the bakehouse, we can pay 1 of each twice to advance 2 spaces. That's another tool. 2 barley, 2 flax, and 2 rye. And then for the manufacturer, we can advance once by spending a flax, a wool, and a hide. And once more by paying another tool, 1 flax and 3 wool. Red moves the carpentry twice by spending 1 tool, 6 clay, and 2 rye. The brew house is advanced once by spending 1 hop and 3 barley. The cooling house is moved twice. So that's another tool. Use 4 milk and 4 meat by paying 2 of each for each advancement. The bakehouse can advance once by paying 1 of each, but unfortunately not a second time. And the manufacturer can advance twice by spending another tool, 1 flax, 1 wool and 1 hide for the first step, and 2 of each for the second step to keep the flax around. And then we reset the bonus and move into the final round. We clear workers of quadrants 2, 3 and 4. Everybody gets the last farmyard card and puts 12 workers on it. For income, blue gets 3 meat and 2 rye. Yellow gets a milk as well as a field with a barley on it. I mean, the barley could of course go anywhere, but why not on here? Red gains a tool, a barley, a field and a meat. And then once more we're doing actions. Yellow is first, moves to the town hall of course, and gets 2 jewelry. Red also goes to the town hall. Blue won't be able to pull off these 3 cards and move along all 4 craft buildings, so he'll need some jewelry. He doesn't have any. The town hall is full, but the land sale has 3 spaces. So let's go here, sell this one, get 1 jewelry and 3 clay. The 3 clay is a bit of a waste since the carpentry building is at the end, but every remaining good will be worth 1/5 of a victory point at the end of the game. Yellow moves to the sheep breeding, decides to pay 4 milk and gets 2 sheep. Red goes fertilizing, moves up 2 fields to level 5, plants a barley on one of them, and then plays this card to give up 1 level 5 field to get 2 level 3 ones. Blue currently has 5 meat and he wants to play a card that will give him 10 points for 5 meat. The thing is, he'll get 4 milk this round, but he'll need 5 goods to advance the cooling house. It would be great if he had 1 more meat, because then he had 4 milk and 1 meat to fulfill these 5 goods. He could go to the weekly market, but the butchery will give him more meat and also some hides, which would be great for this card. I mean, the bonus income is gone, but 3 points are 3 points. So he decides to actually go to the butchery, give up a sheep, but get 4 meat and 2 hides. And then why don't we play this card right away? 5 meat is gone, but that's 10 more points at the end of the game. Yellow also decides to do a land sale. Red goes to the nursery, decides to take 3 crops. He now has 4 rye. He can play this card where he gives up 4 crops of the same type to get a level 2 field and more importantly 2 bonus cards. But actually let's not make this with rye, but with hops, so basically it looks like this. And then he can play this card where he has to pay 1 barley per column without field. All columns have fields, so you can actually play this for free, get 2 tools and 1 more bonus card. And then he can basically play this bonus card. He can give up 2 tools. He won't need that much anyway, he still has 5 left, and there aren't that many boulders and he won't be advancing that much. But those are 3 points at the end of the game. Blue goes to the small trade. He decides to get barley and flax, as well as a wool. Yellow goes to the small trade, takes a flax and a barley and a milk. And also, before we forget, he has this card for having 4 jewelry, which he has. He'll get 0 rye, but 1 sheep. Red now has more land that he can actually use, so he decides to sell some. That's 3 clay and a jewelry. Now he has this very interesting bonus card. Give up 3 jewelry to get 1 each round. This is of course moot, but it's 8 points. And while 8 points sound great, advancing the right 3 buildings with that 3 jewelry could actually be worth a little bit more. We'll have to see it later on. For now, he doesn't play this card. Blue does some cultivation. And now comes the big math, but I guess I already figured most of it out. 6 hops and 6 rye. We need 2 hops for the brew house, if we decide to use 3 barley. So a total of 8. We now have 6. So if we plant this one at level 3, we'll have exactly 8 later on. If we want to have 6 rye, we need to plant this at level 4, because we won't need any for the carpentry. And we'll also need some barley. So let's put this at 3. So we'll harvest 3. Which will be enough for the brew house, and then we'll probably use our jewelry on the bakehouse. And for the manufacture we can then use our 1 wool and the 4 flax that we have, so we actually don't need the hides. So we can play this card, it'll be 3 more points, and these 2 are gone. Yellow uses the busy weekend to also sow something. He takes yet another milk, then he decides to sow barley here and flax here. Red goes to the tool shed, gets 4 more clay. Blue has 3 workers left. He won't be able to fulfill these 2 cards that he's still in his hand. So let's maybe just draw another point card, see what it does. Give up 2 hide and 3 jewelry. That's not very doable. So let's just go for another point card. Maybe we're lucky. Yes, we are. We can turn in 3 tools for another 4 points, which is great because we don't need those tools anyway. So that's another 4 points. Then everybody gets their last farmyard card. So this one, we could give up 1 jewelry to get 5 animal products of the same type. The thing is, we kind of saved the jewelry for the bakehouse, and we're not getting anywhere with animal products in that regard. No, I don't think that we'll actually use this card. Then fallow fields increase their fertility. This is also important in the last round, since fields will go into this calculation with the actual fertility rating. So a field of fertility 5 will actually be a whole point. So blue gets to increase this one. Yellow can increase all these and then 1 more. And red gets to increase every single one plus this also by 1. And then red just got this card. Anywhere but in phase 7, and we're in phase 6 right now, he can pay 2 milk to store up to 3 times. And in this case, this is immediately before the harvest. So this is actually great for him and changes basically everything. He doesn't have too many crops, but at least he can do this. And then we're already off to the harvest. Now blue can play this card. 6 hops and 6 rye, but 10 points. Then yellow also has a lot of cards. First, he has 10 barley, so he can play this bonus card for 3 points. Then he can pay 11 crops of the same type, or the barley, for 10 points. And then he can pay 6 flax and 6 hops for another 10 points. As you can see, again everything mathed out perfectly. Then in phase 8, blue will get 3 milk, and so does yellow, and red gets 5. Then yellow plays this card, where he can give up a sheep for 3 more points. And then it's progress time. As a reminder, in round 6 we need 6 goods, 5 if we can use 2 types, and 4 if we can use 3 different types. For the brew house, 3 barley and 2 hops. For the cooling house, 2 milk and 3 meat. For the bakehouse, we said we use a jewelry, and then we can use the manufacturer very inefficiently with 4 flax and 1 wool, but it gets the job done. So we maxed out our community center at 70 points. Yellow doesn't have a lot of resources left after paying for all those cards, but he still has 6 milk. So it's 1 step for the cooling house. And then he has 4 jewelry, so he spends all but 1 to advance the other 3. And he's also now at 70 points. For red, things are a bit more complicated. First, there are a lot of steps more still left, and also he has a lot of resources, some jewelry, and also these cards that we need to think about. But first things first. Let's start with the cooling house. We want to advance 2 steps. As a reminder, in the last round, tools are not spent, they break, so 1 tool is gone. And for the first step, we pay 4 milk and 1 meat, and for the second step, we pay the same. Then let's continue with the manufacture. It's only quote-unquote 4 goods. So for the first step, we can use a wool, a hide, and 2 flax. We cannot pay this another time. So it's actually another step. For the bakehouse, for the first step, we use 1 flax, 2 barley, and 1 rye. And for the second step, still we don't have any flax. We need to pay 5 goods, so 3 barley and 2 rye. Which breaks yet another tool. So now we're at least at 18 points. But we still got a little way to go. And actually it's not 18, it's 12 more, so we're at 30. Now the question is whether we want to play this card, but I don't think we will, because it's only 8 points. But advancing any one of these buildings with the jewelry is giving us 3 more points, even more so if we use the other 2, so we won't play this card. So then let's take our first step with the brew house. Then we can actually pay for 1 step of the carpentry with 2 rye and 3 clay. So we're at 37 now. And then we have 2 jewelry remaining, so it doesn't really matter which we use to advance, but it'll be 6 more points. 2 tools will break, so let's just use these 2. So at least add it up at 43. And then let's play this bonus card for another 4 points at least. We don't have to reset the bullets in the last phase, so it's endgame scoring time. First, we're looking at the community center and the craft buildings. So blue has 70, yellow has 70, and red has 43. Then sheep. Blue has 3, yellow has 2, and red has 5. Jewelry. Yellow has 1 left, the others don't. Then leftover fields, goods, and tools divided by 5. Blue has 2 tools. 3, 4, 8, 11, 13, 15, 20 divided by 5 is another 4 points. Yellow has 6 tools. 8, 11, 15, 19, 24, 28, 31, 35 for 7 points. Red has 1, 2, 6, 10, 13, 16, 20, 24, 28 divided by 5 is 5 points. And finally the cards. Blue has 10, 14, 19, 29, 32, 35, 38, 42, 43. Yellow has 20, 23, 26, 29, 32, 34, 40. And finally red has 10, 16, 22, 25, 28, 31, 35. So blue wins with 121, yellow has 119, and red has 88. And that was one full 3-player game of Hallertau. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this overview of Hallertau. Since the video is already running for more than an hour now, I'll keep the wrap up short. There's 2 points I would like to address. First, strategy and victory points at the end of the game. Yes, the red player could have done better. It was probably not very good that he was the last player in turn order for almost the entire game. And also I think he didn't acquire enough tools early on in the game, and so the progress with the community center was too slow to compete with the other players. There are many strategy discussions online, and I don't think it's necessary to max out the community center to have a shot at winning. Maybe it's possible to stop at 50 or even 34 points and then make up the rest in cards. In this game the players didn't really go out of their way to draw more cards than they were getting anyway. But I think it is pretty essential to move the community center forward as fast as possible, basically, to get more workers, because that'll benefit you for the rest of the game and simply will allow you to do more actions. The other point is basically the question, what makes this game unique, if at all? I would argue that the card play is the outstanding feature in this game. And I hope that you could see from the walkthrough how the card play works, how it makes you diverge from your planned path, but how it's also very satisfying to combo cards together to see what works, which card to do first, and then use the effect for something else. And also how the cards force you to make decisions, because if you don't play a card, then that's bad. So maybe you can just tweak your strategy to make it work with a certain card. And in a similar way, as I said with the community center before, you have to use those cards. Even if you're able to max out the community center at 70 points without playing any or not many cards, that's just it. You need to invest also in the cards. And since there are 4 decks of gateway cards and 4 decks of farmyard cards, I think there's a lot of replayability there. And I'm already done. If you have any comments, questions, if you want me to compare this to every other Uwe Rosenberg game out there, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll address them as best as I can. So thanks for watching, have fun playing, and until next time. Bye bye!